Hello, my dear students! Welcome to our virtual class in Practical Research 1. The following are the different most essential learning competencies and specific objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the lesson.
On our previous topics, we discussed about qualitative research designs, sample and sampling procedure, data gathering instrument, data gathering procedure, and data analysis procedure, which help you write your well-written research methodology for the third chapter of your qualitative research. This time, let's focus on two of the data gathering instruments, which are observation method and interview, identifying patterns and themes from the data that you have collected, and how to relate the findings with your pertinent literature. In qualitative research, a number of data collection techniques are used, including observations, textual or visual analysis, individual or group interviews, and others. The qualitative approach has the advantage of providing richer knowledge and a deeper understanding of the phenomenon under investigation. In the observation method, it is a data gathering tool which occurs when a researcher studies and records the actions of people they wish to participate in their study. It's possible that the study would take place in natural environments, with the researcher taking detailed notes about what's going on. This is a preferred tool for collecting data where the use of interviews and questionnaires are not possible. The following are the different steps in the process of observing according to Creswell of 2007. First, you have to select the research site. This refers to the site where you can best understand your central phenomenon or topic being studied. Gaining access through letter of consent is a prerequisite or first step that a researcher must do. Second, develop observational protocol. The observational protocol is a method used for recording observation notes. It includes both descriptive, or those about what happened, and reflective, or learning based on what have been observed. Third, focus the observation. Before writing any notes, think of what catches your attention. There will be a lot in the site, but focus your observation only on what will help you understand your research question. Fourth, determine your role. What will you be as a researcher? Will you be a participant observer or non-participant observer? Fifth, record field notes. Using the observation protocol, record what you observe using your 5 senses. The observation should be arranged chronologically or in order. And lastly, slowly withdraw. After observation, slowly withdraw by thanking the participants for their time. Take a look on this given example observation protocol with both the descriptive notes and reflective notes. Now let's have the interview method. The most popular form of tool used in qualitative research is conducting interviews. Interviews are conducted by asking the participants or informants a series of questions and allowing them to reply as honestly as possible. Interviews are used to explore opinions, beliefs, viewpoints, thoughts, experiences, and judgments about something. Researchers prefer the interview method for qualitative research projects because of its high response rate, longer time, and ability to observe behaviors as well as listen to personal opinions and expectations regarding a research subject of interest. Still, according to Creswell, the following are the different steps in conducting a qualitative interview. First, decide whether interviews are appropriate. To begin with, participants should agree to the interview method. Otherwise, this method is not necessary and will not yield any relevant information. Assess if the information is sensitive and observation will be enough to gather the needed information. Second, choose the type of interview. Will you use a structured or unstructured interview? What type will you use on focus group discussion or one-on-one interview? Third, invite participants. A letter of permission should be sent to the participants, and they must reply indicating their consent before conducting the interview session. Fourth, develop an interview protocol. This is a list of questions or guide questions which you will be asking to the interviewees. The questions are based on your research questions and should be able to produce information needed to answer your research questions. Fifth, arrange the audio equipment. Make sure to be ready with your audio equipment. You may use your cell phone or any other audio recording device. It should be stated in your letter of permission that you will be recording the entire conversation and you are the only one who will have access to it. Sixth, arrange for a quiet setting for the interview. A comfortable and quiet place chosen by the participants is preferable. Seventh, conduct the interview. Check audio equipment before the interview. First, introduce yourself and the research being conducted to the participant interviewee. Stay on topic and to the time mentioned in the letter of permission. And lastly, follow up after an interview. Thank the interviewee after the session and honor the requests such as the copy of the abstract. In cases that a follow-up is needed in order to clarify some points raised during the interview session, the interviewees must be notified. An interview protocol must contain the following parts according to Creswell of 2007. First, it must have the basic information about the interview. It includes the time and date of the interview, where the interview takes place, and who the participants to be interviewed are. Second, it must have the introduction. This provides instructions to the interviewer which will serve as his or her guide in conducting the session. It is a prerequisite that the interviewer introduce himself or herself, including the objectives of the research. Third, it must also have the opening question. This is about getting to know participants so they will feel at ease. Questions related to their work or activities are good opening questions. Very personal questions must be avoided. Next is content questions. These are sub-questions based on the central phenomenon being studied. And lastly, it must have the closing instructions. Thank the interviewee for his or her time. Shown on your screen is an example of an interview protocol. There are some other things to consider and reflect on in the preparation of a qualitative research interview, which includes the guidepost in preparing the interview guide, the kinds of questions, the practical details to consider before the interview, the tips in interviewing for the first time, the criteria for a successful interviewee, and the things to do after the interview. Listed below are the guideposts in preparing an interview guide according to Bryman of 2008. First, create a certain amount of order on the topic areas so that your questions will flow reasonably well, but be prepared to change your questions during the interview. Next, formulate interview questions or topics in a way that will help you answer your research questions, but not too specific. Third, try to use a language that is comprehensible and relevant to people that you are interviewing. Fourth, do not ask leading questions. And fifth, remember to ensure that you ask or record face sheet information of a general kind and a specific kind because such is useful in contextualizing their answers. Shown in your screen are the different types of questions which you could ask in the preparation of your interview guide. But please take note to give some space for silence and permit pauses to indicate that you are granting the interviewee to think about his or her answer. This is an actual example of an interview guide question in which a researcher should align interview questions with the research questions. Now let's move to the next topic, which is inferring and explaining patterns and themes from data. The analysis of qualitative data involves identifying, examining, and interpreting patterns and themes in the new data gathered by the researcher. These patterns and themes will help you find answers to the research questions posed at the start of the research project. There are no prescribed rules to follow. They depend on how you will align or classify the themes and patterns. When we say conclusions, these are done in research and are based solely on empirical data or data or information that comes from the research based on observations and experiences of the participants of the study. These conclusions, based on reasoning and factual evidence, are called inference. Patterns and themes are words or phrases that collectively describe the experience or thoughts of every participant. They represent broad categories of information. Conclusions in qualitative research are based on patterns and themes. In order to identify themes, qualitative researchers use codes. These codes are simple labels that help qualitative researchers identify similar experiences or thoughts. These words and phrases become themes because they appear on several occasions and are mentioned by many participants. Hence, these words or phrases that describe participants' experiences and thoughts should be coded accordingly for easy reference and classification when interpreting the results. Codes that are grouped together are called themes. These are the words or phrases that will manifest in the interview transcript and researches during analysis. Coding, on the other hand, is a process of analyzing the data and searching for essential information that answers the research questions. According to Farber of 2006, this is a process of filtering the data in which these essential words are marked, labeled, or coded. Codes are words that represent themes or patterns. These are considered essential if they occur or have been mentioned several times by the informants. There are two types of codes in qualitative research according to Taylor Powell and Renner of 2003, and these are emergent codes, or those that show up during analysis, and preset codes, which are those that have been identified prior to analysis. Qualitative researchers use codes to easily identify meanings and group similar patterns or themes that occur or transpire in the interview transcript of each participant. By using codes, the researcher can easily make an inference. Shown on your screen is an example of preset codes or categories because they have been identified prior to analysis. Shown on your screen are examples of emergent codes or categories because they are being identified as the analysis or coding progresses. As can be seen in the given example, all participants' responses per questions are transcribed and arranged accordingly. Written before the responses are codes represented by letters. These letters refer to variety, relevance, facilitators, and attendance. As a researcher, it is your responsibility to generate possible and relevant codes as dictated by the responses. Yes or no responses are not usable data in this case. The following are the different things that you have to remember in analyzing data and using codes or categories according to Taylor Powell and Renner of 2003. First, get to know your data. Read your data very well and have a good grasp of the meaning that each statement tries to convey. Open coding, or the initial coding, is the process of examining data and finding themes that are apparent. Second, focus the analysis. Your participants might be giving pieces of information that are not related or significant to your present study. Be sure to identify and disregard them. Third, review the purpose and go back to the research question. Always go back to the purpose of your study in your research questions. They will guide and help you identify what is important, and they are your main guide in analyzing your data. Fourth, identify themes or patterns. Use codes or labels, such as the one in the example given, during the process. Basically, we use labels or highlighter to identify the themes or patterns. Your thorough understanding of your data will facilitate this process. Fifth, ask teammates to analyze. You can ask another person or your teammates to reanalyze the data to make sure nothing is missed during the open coding. Sixth, organize themes into categories, whether it is preset or emergent. Once codes have been identified, you can now organize them in tabular form. And lastly, Identify patterns within and among categories. This is when you categorize patterns and themes that you have identified in your data. This is the final step. You can further streamline your categories by looking at those that you think could be combined to form just one category. Go back to your research questions, and those themes and patterns that you have identified are the answers to your research questions. Given on the screen is an example from an actual qualitative study in which the answers are categorized according to themes based on the following research questions. Shown in your screen is an example of an actual data analyzed by the researchers. In the first column is the area of focus, or the first statement of the problem, followed by the verbatim responses in the second column, and then the themes that they have formulated from these verbatim responses. Please read it silently. The identification of meaningful patterns and themes is the core of qualitative data analysis. These are two of the primary ways of doing the analysis, namely content analysis and thematic analysis, which we discussed on our previous lesson. Let's discuss first about content analysis. This technique could be used when qualitative data had been collected through interviews, focus groups, observations, and documentary analysis. This procedure is used to categorize oral or spoken words or a person's conduct or behavior, sorting, grouping, codification, and tabulation. Content analysis may be done on two levels. First is the basic level, or a descriptive discussion of what the data is. It simply specifies what was said, and no further explanation or comments on how and why it was said should be done. Second is the higher level, or a more interpretative analysis that combines the specific responses as well as what may have been inferred or implied from the data. Interpretation involves what the data means. Content analysis also involves coding and classifying of the data, also referred to as categorizing and coding or indexing. The aim of content analysis is to make sense of data and to make inferences about the messages or findings. Content analysis does not measure or quantify data. It is a research method for subjective interpretation of the content of text data through the systematic classification process of coding and identifying themes and patterns. The following are the different steps of content analysis. First, prepare your data. Then, determine the unit of analysis. Develop the categories and coding system. Afterwards, pre-test the coding system. Then, code all the textual data. Check the validity and reliability of the data. Draw inferences. And present the results. Thematic analysis, on the other hand, is a form of pattern recognition within the data. It provides a simple interpretation and concise description of themes and patterns in the dataset. General procedure involves a careful review of the raw data. You identify the themes after coding and categorizing the data. The most widely used steps for conducting thematic analysis was provided by Brown and Clark of 2006, which is a 6-step process of conducting thematic analysis. These steps are as follows. First, familiarize yourself with your data. Then, generate initial codes. Afterwards, search for themes. Then, review the themes. Define and name the themes. And lastly, prepare the report. So what are the differences between content analysis and thematic analysis? Reviewing through the steps discussed in conducting content analysis and thematic analysis would reveal that they both involve going through data codification and identification of themes and patterns. The following are the main differences. First, content analysis focuses more on how frequently various categories appear or occur, while thematic analysis is involved in identifying themes and patterns and analyzing each theme to build up the whole picture of the data. Thematic analysis can be more in-depth and broader in analysis and understanding. Content analysis can be used for both qualitative and quantitative data, while thematic analysis is mainly used for qualitative research. Also, content analysis is focused on codes, while thematic analysis is more focused on themes. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is relating the research findings with pertinent literature. One of the most important aspects of research is situating or comparing your findings not only in relation to your research questions, but also in the context of existing knowledge. Part of your Chapter 4 is the discussion of research findings. The discussion of research findings should provide not only a review of the findings, but also examples of novelty or original thought. As you relate these results to relevant literature, your discussion of the research findings should be well organized and broad in scope. This discussion should give you the following opportunities. First, the opportunity to highlight and discuss how the findings of your study have reinforced what has already been done by other student researchers in the same area. Also, the opportunity to study carefully how your study reflects or differs from existing knowledge of the area where you have chosen to conduct your research. Next is the opportunity to discuss the contribution of the findings of your study to the body of existing literature and knowledge. And lastly is the opportunity to explain why you thought it necessary to embark on the research that you have done. You have to remember that you have to relate the research findings to your pertinent literature. Here are some reminders in writing the section on relating the research findings to pertinent literature which are listed below. You have to ask yourself the following questions. Does your school provide a particular research format to follow? Is there a separate chapter or section for this? Are there specific guidelines to follow in writing this section? Or should you directly link each of your findings to existing literature or put them together in a chapter or section? If these questions need clarification, you have to consult your research advisor or your research teacher. The following are the different illustrative examples or sentence starters which you could use in reference to pertinent literature. The following are the different illustrative examples when indicating few or limited literature. Always remember that no matter how significant your work is, and no matter how your project seems similar to other works, you first discuss and explain fully the results of your findings and how they will contribute to the knowledge base. Please read silently the example corroboration of the previous study to the findings of the present study.
That's all about our lesson for this week in Practical Research 1. Thank you for watching and see you again next week.